Hello, dear students and friends. In my class series today, I would be taking up the topic AUB, that is abnormal uterine bleeding. Now, in our clinical practice, day in and out, we do come across women with bleeding problems or menstrual issues, and that too in all age groups. So, I would be discussing that. In addition to this, in the end, to make it a bit more interesting, case based discussions I would be taking up with emphasis on their management protocol. Abnormal uterine bleeding, case based discussions. A woman is a full circle. Within her is the power to create, nurture, and transform. Now, if this woman is disturbed by abnormal or erratic bleeding, then it really becomes a problem. And for us clinicians, our aim must be to treat her problems and at the same time to save her uterus. If you look at the historical prospect, William Cullen in the 70s, who was a professor of physics, coined the term menorrhagia, meaning to burst forth monthly, in order to describe the excessive bleeding that many of his patients experience. Then, in 1935, the term DUB, dysfunctional uterine bleeding, was coined. The very use of terminology to describe these AUB symptoms has led to difficulties in many areas, especially in documenting these symptoms, in reaching a consensus on the use of various diagnostic techniques, medical and surgical therapies. These concerns led to the formation of Menstrual Disorders Working Group by the Menstrual Disorder Committee of FIGO. They then subsequently developed the palm coin classification, and the terminology for AUB symptoms, especially in women in the reproductive age group. The definitions. Initially, we always used the term DUP, which meant irregular menstrual bleeding, usually heavy, prolonged, or frequent. And it was only a diagnosis of exclusion after normal anatomy and other medical illnesses and pregnancy had been excluded. It becomes difficult to exclude these situations many times, and therefore the new terminology AUB, which meant bleeding from uterine corpus that is abnormal in regularity, volume, frequency, or duration, and it occurs in absence of pregnancy. FIGO revised the terminology system and now uses AUB instead of DUB. For it to be acute, if it occurs less than 6 months, and it is chronic if more than 6 months. It is commonly associated with anovulation. Adolescent and perimenopausal women are affected the most. The incidence is 5% in reproductive age women, and the prevalence is 10 to 30% in reproductive age women. Now, let us look at the various terminologies. The older terminologies which we were using, menorrhagia, metrorrhagia, hypermenorrhea, polymenorrhea, polymenorrhagia, etc., now have been discarded. And now, instead, in order to describe the menstrual problems, they are based only on these four things: frequency of the cycle, duration of the cycle, regularity, and flow volume. Now, this system for definition, frequency. Frequency is quoted in days. It could be frequent, normal, or infrequent. Frequent if they occur less than 24 days, normal between 24 and 38 days, and infrequent if more than 38 days. Regularity of menses, cycle to cycle regularity in an average variation over 12 months is included. Absent means no bleeding, regular in a variation of 2 to 20 days, irregular more than 20 days, and prolonged. Now, the duration of flow, again in days. Prolonged if bleeding is for more than 8 days, normal 4.5 to 8, and shortened if it is less than 4.5. Volume of monthly blood loss in ml, we know that normal volume is 20 to 80. It could be heavy if it is more than 80 ml, and light if it is less than 20 ml. So in order to describe the menstrual pattern, only these have been included. This is the chart according to FIGO, where they've included, it's a tick box chart, frequency, duration, regularity, and volume. But two more terms have been included, intermenstrual bleeding, that is bleeding in between cycles, whether it is present, whether it is random, or early cycle, mid cycle, late cycle. And one more term, unscheduled bleeding on hormonal medication. So if she's on birth control pills or if she's using rings or patches, then whether she has unscheduled bleeding, whether it is present or absent. If you look at the etiology, in 90% cases, anovulation is the cause. There is loss of cyclic endometrial stimulation. Elevated estrogen levels do stimulate endometrial growth, but no organized progesterone withdrawal, and therefore no withdrawal bleeding. Endometrium eventually outgrows the blood supply, breaks down, and sloughs away from the uterus. 6 to 10% of these cases have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, adolescent AUB is usually due to immature hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis, and that too leads to anovulatory cycles. Now, the mnemonic palm coin, which has been developed as a new nomenclature to describe AUB, is mainly for reproductive age women. Palm describes the structural causes of AUB, and Cohen describes the non-structural causes. So P for polyp, A for adenomyosis, L for leiomyoma, and M for malignancy or hyperplasia. Cohen, C for coagulopathy, O for ovulatory disorders, E for endometrial disorders, I iatrogenic, and N not yet classified. Now, besides this, there are some other causes which we shall see in the subsequent slides. Now, if you look at the site where abnormality is, it can be divided into the uterus, adnexa, cervix, vagina, or vulva. So this is the palm coin classification. Now, for the leiomyomas, there's a subclassification system. Submucosal are divided into 0, 1, 2, pedunculated is 0, 1 is less than 50% intramural, 2 is more than or equal to 50% intramural. So if it is submucosal, you write SM, but if it is other, then you write O, and they are then further classified from 3 to 8, depending on the location, as you can see. Some are hybrid leiomyomas, that is from one variety they're going to the next variety. So it can be described, you can write 2 and 5 together and separated by a hyphen. As you can see in this chart, 0, submucosal 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7. Now in the lower chart, because it is submucosal and becoming subserosal, it is described in the form of a 2-6, so 2-6. So this is how fibroids are described. Now, a patient can have more than one cause responsible for the abnormal bleeding. As you can see in this first chart, there are fibroids. So P0, A0, but L, L1, and SM. So this is how they describe the variety of fibroid. In the next, A1, rest are 0. So you have to write this mnemonic palm coin and then describe in the subheading which kind of abnormality it is. So here it is a polyp, so P1, rest are 0. Endometrial pathology, so E1. So this is how they are classified. As you can see here, L1, which is SM, M1. So this is how more than one kind is described in this chart. Why was it introduced? What are its advantages? It is a systematic, well-defined, and extremely useful algorithm in day-to-day clinical practice. The updated terminologies, definitions, and classifications have received international acceptance and would be extremely useful in future clinical resource and research. So it would be streamlined and everyone would describe these findings in a single format. This kind of standardized system of terminologies will help to improve communication between clinicians around the world, but would also help to simplify communication between clinicians and patients. So this is the chart which shows the various causes of genital tract bleeding: uterus, polyps, adenomyosis, leiomyoma, malignancy and hyperplasia, coagulopathy, ovulatory disorders, endometrial disorders, iatrogenic, that is the use of various medications, anticoagulants, gonadal, steroid drugs, the use of devices, etc. Then cause could be in the ectocervix, vulva, vagina. Other causes which are not in these charts, it could be iatrogenic in the form of medications, as I described, anticoagulants, steroids, tamoxifen, hormonal medications in the form of LNG, IUCD, SSRIs, antipsychotic medications, and HRT. Other causes are pregnancy, advanced or fulminant liver disease. The medical causes have not been included. Chronic renal disease, inflammatory bowel disease, excessive weight gain, increased exercise. Genetics could also be one of the causes, and it may include inherited disorders of hemostasis. Now, whenever there is abnormal uterine bleeding, there could be some cause in the endometrium, and this woman could be at a risk for endometrial cancer. So, let us see what the risk factors are. Age more than 40 years, obesity, PCOS, history of diabetes, nulliparity, early menarche or late menopause, hypertension, chronic anovulation or infertility, unopposed estrogen therapy, history of breast cancer or endometrial hyperplasia. If there is a history of breast cancer, tamoxifen use has to be inquired for. A family history of gynecologic, breast or colon cancer, and thyroid disease. So this family history of Lynch syndrome is very important. So this is how, if women come with excessive bleeding and they have this risk factors, they should be compulsorily further evaluated. The workup for women with perimenopausal bleeding: a careful history, complete hematological profile, an ultrasound, especially a TVS, pap smear, endometrial biopsy, dilatation and curettage, hysteroscopy if required, and specific causes, other tests to rule out the various other causes. These are the initial tests and the diagnostic procedures which may be required. Initially, the blood test, CBC, coagulation profile, TSH, prolactin, then 17-hydroxyprogesterone if CAH is suspected, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or testosterone or DHES if PCOS is suspected, screening for STIs, transvaginal scan, sonohysterography. A pap smear is essential in all women, endometrial biopsy, sometimes a DNC, and a hysteroscopy. This is the PalmCoin worksheet. So depending on the cause, like if polyps are present, the diagnostic methods for identification of these polyps, when they were done, and what was the result. Again, if you suspect adenomyosis, either vaginal ultrasound, hysteroscopy, or MRI, and in few cases, histopathology may be required to confirm the diagnosis. Similarly, in other conditions. So this is the worksheet. It tells you what the diagnostic methods have been done, the date when they have been done, and what were the results. Coming to the management could be medical or surgical depending on the cause. Medical management: progesterone releasing IUCD, progestins, estrogen, testosterone, and various other medications can be used, especially in fibroids, ulipristal acetate, mifepristone, or even Dymagest for endometriosis. Between medical and surgical procedures are the minimal invasive procedures. The minimal invasive procedures like hysteroscopic endometrial ablation, laser ablation, electrosurgical use of electrosurgical ball, or hysteroscopic endometrial resection, which we commonly call as TCRE, transcervical resection of endometrium. Other Non-hysteroscopic procedures like thermochoice, radiofrequency, unipolar electrodes, bipolar electrode, NovaSure. So thermochoice and NovaSure are the commonly used ones to ablate the endometrium, especially in those cases who are not fit for hysterectomy and who have some condition in which they have excessive bleeding and require some sort of treatment. The definitive surgery is, of course, in the form of hysterectomy, laparoscopic assisted vaginal hysterectomy, total laparoscopic hysterectomy, or even supracervical hysterectomy, depending on the condition and the expertise of the surgeon. Even a non-descent vaginal hysterectomy or abdominal hysterectomy can be preferred for certain cases. Now, let us come to the first case. A 13-year-old girl comes to the OPD. She has continuous moderate painless bleeding for last 22 days. Her menarche was 22 days back. So this was her first bleed. No history of easy bruisability, epistaxis or gum bleeding, no significant personal and family history or history of any drug intake. She is not sexually active. Her vitals are stable. There is mild pallor, no petechiae. Weight is 50 kg. Per abdomen is soft, no organomegaly, and PSPV not done. What would be your approach towards the management of this little girl? Because this is her first menarche bleed. Now, the investigations first, which we would do, are a CBC, a thyroid profile, a coagulation profile, including platelet, prothrombin time, APTT. In some cases, von Willebrand factor and factor 8 may be required. Serum prolactin, especially if she has history of galactorrhea or history of headaches, an ultrasound pelvis to rule out any structural problems. So ideally testing should be done before starting any kind of therapy. Her CBC is 10.5, rest all investigations are normal, uterus is of normal size, endometrial thickness is 6 millimeters. Now what is your impression and how would you manage? The most common cause of AUB in adolescence is immaturity of the HPO axis, and this is what we must understand. 40 to 50% of adolescents have excessive bleeding in their first period, and they may have a coagulopathy, especially if they give you a history of epistaxis or petechiae. So that should essentially be evaluated in each and every case. Now, for the treatment, both hormonal and non-hormonal therapies can be given. Non-hormonal therapy is the primary option. Initially, we can give her tranexamic acid to doses as high as 1 gram 4 times a day for 5 days, or hormonal treatment in the form of combined oral contraceptives, which is the secondary option. In some cases, progesterones. In some cases, who do not tolerate combined oral contraceptives, only progesterone pills. But what is more important in these cases is reassurance and counseling. Monophasic combined oral contraceptive with a very low dose of estrogen, that is 30 to 35 micrograms of ethinyl estradiol. If the girl has moderate bleeding, one tablet can be given 3 times a day till bleeding stops, usually within 2 days, and then one tablet twice a day for 5 days, and then gradually tapered to one tablet once a day for a total of 21 days. If bleeding recurs when the dose is decreased to once per day, twice per day dosing can be given. But this treatment is given only for 21 days. But in certain situations, bleeding may not stop and there could be severe bleeding. So she requires more dose, a further dose, like injected estrogens were being given initially. We can also give an estrogen containing pill, one pill, Premarin, or any other estrogen containing pill, one pill QID till bleeding stops, and then TDS, and then gradually twice a day for 2 weeks. Now you would think, why hormonal therapy? The rationale is administration of exogenous estrogens. It causes further growth of the endometrium, endometrial proliferation. which heals the sites of endometrial bleeding and provides hemostasis. Subsequently, giving of progestogen stabilizes the endometrial lining, and this is how bleeding stops. Progesterone only pills are indicated when COC are contraindicated or they are not tolerated, mostly because of nausea and vomiting which they cause. A high dose estrogen therapy can cause nausea, and this may result in decreased adherence or decreased compliance. So, always give an antiemetic along with it. There is a concern that high doses of estrogen may cause premature closure of the growth plates and thereby reducing the ultimate adult height. But we should know that by the time of menarche, most female adolescents have undergone their growth spurt and have achieved more than 90% of their adult height, so it would not make much of a difference. So that was the first menarchal bleed in a adolescent girl. Now let us look at the second case. A 15-year-old girl comes with her mother with heavy periods since 6 months. Menarche was at 12 years of age, so she's had bleeding for 3 years and now they've become heavy. Cycles are 7 to 10 days at an interval of 40 to 42 days. She's not sexually active, no significant personal and family history. Her weight is a bit high, 78 kg, BMI is 30, and no clinical features of hyperandrogenism. What will be your approach? Now, for all cases of AUB, these are the basic investigations: a CBC, a thyroid profile, a coagulation profile, and an ultrasound scan. Her CBC is 10.5, thyroid is normal, coagulation profile is normal. A trans-abdominal scan shows a normal uterus, endometrial thickness 5 mm, both ovaries show multiple follicles, and there's no free fluid. So this is AUBO. Both hormonal and non-hormonal therapies again can be given, but to emphasize reassurance and counseling, which is a must, we need to tell them that their initial cycles within few years of menarche could be abnormal and that they would gradually settle down. For her, because her BMI is high, the most important thing is weight reduction and lifestyle modification. In addition to that, because she has anemia, correction of anemia is essential. So now coming to the third case. She is a 28-year-old female, had a cesarean section 3 months back. Her antenatal and postnatal periods were uneventful, and at present she is breastfeeding. Now she complains that her bleeding has not stopped since her delivery. It's not very heavy, but she needs to use one pad every day. She has mild pallor, is afebrile, vitals are stable. Her weight is 70 kg. Per abdomen soft, uterus is not palpable, it means it has involuted, but bleeding PV on examination is present. The os is closed, uterus is bulky, and fornices are clear. Her investigations: hemoglobin is 10.5, total count is 7,000, thyroid is normal, coagulation profile is normal, a transvaginal scan shows a bulky uterus with normal ecotexture, endometrial thickness 7 mm, cavity is empty, no products of conception, both ovaries are normal, small free fluid in pouch of Douglas. So in these women post cesarean, they can be bleeding and there could be some products of conception in the form of membranes or small pieces of placenta which could be adhered, and that would be the cause of bleeding. So in these cases, a transvaginal scan is essential. In her case, the treatment guidelines include LNG insertion, giving of a dipomedroxyprogesterone acetate injection or progesterone only pill, ormeloxifene, and combined oral contraceptive. Now, combined oral contraceptives suppress lactation, so they are not given. We can give a progesterone only pill, but that may not be required. In these cases, because they require contraception, in addition to use of progesterone, An LNG IUS is recommended if she wishes to use it for at least 1 year. Ormeloxifene is also a good alternative, a 60 milligram tablet, one tablet twice a week for 3 months, followed by one tablet once a week for the next 3 months, can be used. It is effective up to 1 year after stopping it in lactating women. It is excreted in milk in quantities considered unlikely to cause any deleterious effect on suckling babies. The only thing is that it is not recommended for women who are suffering from recent history of hepatitis or liver disorders. It increases the endometrial thickness and at times ovarian cysts may be formed. But this is a very good alternative for such women. So two things can be done, either an LNG IUS or the use of ormeloxifene. So now let us look at case 4. She is a 34-year-old woman complaining of painless heavy periods since the last 1 year, which are associated with premenstrual spotting for 3 to 5 days. The cycles are for 10 to 12 days at an interval of 18 to 30 days. She is para 2, both cesarean sections, not ligated. No history of any drug intake. On PS examination, superficial cervical erosion is present all around. Her investigations, again, her hemoglobin is 9, TSH is normal, pap smear is normal, PVS shows a bulky uterus with endometrial thickness 8 mm, a small clear cyst of 2 into 2 centimeters in the right ovary, and rest all normal. For this woman, ultrasound imaging is mandatory. It should be done in all patients of AUB to evaluate the endometrium, especially the endometrial thickness, the adenexum, the role of DNC and endometrial biopsy or aspirate, again, depending on the condition, depending on your ultrasound findings. According to good clinical practice guidelines, endometrial assessment is done for women older than 40 years of age. An endometrial histopathology may be essential, especially so if these women are at a risk for endometrial cancer. So, if these women above 45 or above 40 have risk factors for endometrial cancer, which we had already discussed, they've had irregular bleeding, obesity, endometrial thickness more than 12 mm, polycystic ovarian disease, diabetes, history of malignancy, use of tamoxifen, AUB unresponsive to medical management, or the history of HNPC syndrome, hereditary non-polyposis colorectal cancer or Lynch syndrome, these women should be evaluated further. Now, you can get an endometrial histopathology by a simple Pipel biopsy, which is known as endometrial biopsy by Pipel, or a hysteroscopy can be performed if the endometrium is thick on imaging and this endometrial biopsy is inadequate. The treatment guidelines, LNG insertion, we can use DMP injection or meloxifene, combined oral contraceptives. We need to rule out erosion and rule out vaginal and cervical infections. Sometimes intramenstrual bleeding or spotting after coitus could be the cause. It could be the result of chlamydial infection. LNG IUS is recommended if she wishes to use it for at least 1 year. Now the next case. A 40-year-old female complains of heavy and painful periods for last 2 years. Cycles are again 5 to 6 days at an interval of 18 to 23 days. Hemoglobin is 9, vitals are stable. Her weight is 70 kg. Transvaginal scan shows an uniformly enlarged uterus, 8 weeks in size. Myometrium shows salt and pepper appearance. Endometrial thickness is 9 mm. Right ovary shows a small hemorrhagic cyst, 1.8 to 2 centimeters, and rest normal. Now, endometrial aspirate was done for this woman. It shows secretory endometrium. So, by this we mean Secretory endometrium means progesterone phase. What is your impression and how would you manage this case? So she's a case of AUBA, as we had seen that she had a salt and pepper appearance on the endometrium, on the myometrium. So it's a case of adenomyosis. In such women, we need to decide whether they are desirous of fertility or not. If she is desirous of fertility, unwilling for immediate contraception, LNG IUS is the first line therapy. But if she's unwilling for LNG use, we can use GnRH agonist with add-back therapy, or we can also use combined oral contraceptives and other agents like danazol, NSAIDs, and progesterones. But if she's not desirous of fertility, then again, initially we must always think of medical management. LNG IUS is the first line management. GnRH and agonists are costly. They require add-back therapy, and there are some problems like osteoporosis. So, in such cases, who refuse medical management, or if medical management is ineffective, vaginal or laparoscopic hysterectomy. Adenomyomectomy is a conservative surgery offered in selective cases with infertility or with a strong desire to retain the uterus if you find adenomyosis at a particular area which can be removed. Now, GnRH agonists, if they are used for more than 3 months, add back therapy is essential. Estrogen and progesterone are given either sequentially or combined so as to prevent osteoporosis. Low dose estrogen, combined equine estrogen Premarin 0.625 or a lower dose 0.3 or estradiol valeric 1 milligram for 30 days, followed by low dose progesterone medroxyprogesterone acetate 2.5 milligrams for 30 days or 10 milligrams for 10 days. Norethistérone can also be given and micronized progesterone can also be given. In some women, Tibolone, selective estrogen receptor modulator, 2.5 milligram given OD is also beneficial. Now, case 6. She is a 42-year-old obese female and she has heavy periods for 3 years. She is diabetic, controlled with drugs, no history of hypertension, tuberculosis, or hypothyroidism. Her weight is 86 kg. TBA shows an enlarged uterus 6 weeks in size, endometrial thickness 11 mm. Both ovaries have small, simple, clear cysts of 2 by 2 centimeters, which are normal, and no free fluid. Now, because the endometrium was thick, an endometrial biopsy was done and it showed endometrial hyperplasia without atypia. What would you do further? And what is the role of hysteroscopy? Hysteroscopy should not be ideally done in all cases. It is not to be done routinely. There are specific indications, like women with intermenstrual spotting. If you suspect polyp, or any intracavitary lesion which is not seen on a transvaginal scan. So no hysterosalpingography is done. But if that also is not conclusive, then we can do a hysteroscopy for an intracavitary lesion. It can be done if there is dysynchronicity between the symptoms, ultrasound, and histopathology findings. If there is increased endometrial thickening on transvaginal scan, but the histopathology is inadequate or atrophic, and if there is no response to medical treatment. In these cases, endometrial hyperplasia without atypia, the risk of progression to endometrial cancer is less. It is less than 5% over 20 years. Majority of cases without atypia will regress spontaneously during follow-up, but reassurance is essential. Now, for endometrial hyperplasia classification, the newer terms include only two conditions: hyperplasia without atypia and atypical hyperplasia. The chances of coexistent invasive endometrial cancer in hyperplasia with atypia is less than 1%, and the relative risk of progression to invasive cancer is only 1.01. But in cases of atypical hyperplasia, the chances of coexistent invasive endometrial cancer is 25 to 33%. And this is the reason why these women would require a hysterectomy when their family size is complete, because the relative risk of progression to invasive cancer is also 14 to 45. Endometrial hyperplasia without atypia, LNG-IUS is recommended as the first-line therapy. If LNG-IUS is contraindicated or patient is unwilling to use it, oral continuous progesterones can be used. Either medroxyprogesterone 10 to 20 milligram per day or norethisterone in higher doses 10 to 15 milligram per day. Cyclic progesterone should not be used because they are less effective in inducing regression of endometrial hyperplasia without atypia. And these progesterones have to be used continuously for a period of 6 months. Follow-up oral progesterones or LGIS should be used for a minimum of 6 months in order to induce histological regression. At least 2 consecutive 6-monthly negative biopsies should be obtained. So after giving or after inserting LNG-IUS or giving progesterone, after 6 months, we need to do an endometrial biopsy. If 2 such 6-monthly biopsies are negative, it means that it has regressed. Once 2 negative consecutive endometrial biopsies have been obtained, then the long-term follow-up should be considered with annual endometrial biopsies, either lifelong or till hysterectomy is indicated. Now, in these women, hysterectomy is indicated when there is progression to atypical hyperplasia, which is seen during follow-up endometrial biopsies. If there is no histological regression of hyperplasia in spite of 12 months of treatment, so after 2 biopsies, after 12 months, if it still remains endometrial hyperplasia without atypia, then we may consider hysterectomy. Or if there is a relapse of endometrial hyperplasia after completing progesterone treatment, if there is persistence of bleeding symptoms, and if the woman declines to undergo endometrial surveillance or comply with medical treatment. So these are the specific indications for hysterectomy. Now, coming to case 7, she's a bit elderly aged woman. She's 58 years. She has first episode of spotting 3 months back and had after 8 years of menopause. So she had menopause at the age of 50. Now she has the first episode of spotting. Her earlier cycles were regular. She's para 2. Last delivery was 26 years back. No history of hypertension, diabetes, tubercular, UTI, or hypothyroidism. No family history of malignancy. Mild pallor is there. Her BP is 146 by 86. Weight is 65 kg. PSPV examination is normal, breasts are normal, and there is no evidence of vaginitis. The most commonest cause of postmenopausal bleeding in many cases is atrophic vaginitis. TVS shows uterus normal, endometrial thickness 5 mm. Both ovaries are normal, there's no cyst, no free fluid, no tenderness. An endometrial biopsy was done and it turned out to be atrophic endometrium. In such cases, a hysteroscopy is also advised. Her hysteroscopy was normal and there was no focal lesion seen. So the treatment in this case would be, because it is atrophic, estrogen creams or pessaries can be used, although the treatment may not be necessary if the symptoms are mild. But the most important thing is the endometrial thickness cutoff. Cutoff is 4 mm. If it is less than 4 mm, then nothing is to be done. But if it is more than 4 mm, evaluation is to be done. Now, because it turned out to be atrophic endometrium, for her, mandatory follow-up by transvaginal scan is essential. The next case, case 8. She is a 42 years old female, para 1 L1, but now she has a mitral valve prolapse and polymenorrhagia since 2 years. Previous menstrual cycle 6 to 7 days, at an interval of 15 days, irregular with heavy clots. No history of contraception or tubal ligation. Her vitals are stable, but her weight is 130 kg. Endometrium showed, ultrasound scan showed 14 mm endometrial thickness with an adenomyoma. So it's a bulky uterus with adenomyoma and endometrial thickness is 14 mm. Treatment. Due to gross obesity, cardiac disease, patient was not fit for any major surgery. After counseling and taking consent, she was posted for endometrial biopsy under paracervical block. The histopathology showed cystic glandular hyperplasia without atypia. A Mirena LNG IUS was inserted, but then she continued to bleed intermittently for 1 year. So she had hyperplasia. She was given progesterone in the form of Mirena, then still she was bleeding. That comes to be an indication for hysterectomy. Therefore, because she was bleeding, repeat endometrial biopsy frozen section was done, which again showed cystic glandular hyperplasia without atypia. So, for her treatment, thermal balloon ablation was done, which gave her significant relief. This was followed up regularly for a year, and she's doing well. So, in some cases, these minimally invasive procedures or non surgical procedures may prove to be useful. This is the algorithm for abnormal uterine bleeding. We must keep it as a ready reckoner for such cases who come to our clinics. So evaluate by the palm coin classification, rule out other causes. If you suspect pregnancy, do a beta HCG. HCG is positive, then consider pregnancy related etiology. HCG is negative, her age is less than 35, it could be anovulatory. We need to do the investigation CBC, TSH, prolactin. They could be normal or elevated. If they are elevated, then we have identified the cause, treat the cause. It could be a pituitary adenoma or hypothyroidism. If they are normal, then consider PCOS or get in pelvic ultrasound. Consider endometrial biopsy if she is more than 35 years and has history of endometrial cancer risk factors. Now, if she's ovulatory, then in those cases also these investigations have to be done. If they are normal, an endometrial biopsy is required. If they are abnormal, managed, then manage according to the results. But if she's at the age above 35 years, then and if she has risk factors, she should be essentially evaluated thoroughly to rule out endometrial hyperplasia and subsequent endometrial malignancy. So thank you. Do if you have any queries, do ask me on my chat box or WhatsApp, and do subscribe to my channel. There are many more video lectures. Thank you.